listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hi there, this is Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for another episode on a podcast all about shedding our limiting labels and beliefs so we can live our dreams and shine our lights in the world. This week, we are joined by Stacy DeVries. Oh boy, Stacy's got a story. She is the principal and a teacher for an online high school in British Columbia, and she enjoys Enneagram coaching on the side. So you guys know we're running a whole series on Enneagram, and Stacy comes at it from a little bit different perspective. Her specialty is teens and students who school at home. She also works with teachers and students, including those homeschoolers, and organizations that want to use the Enneagram in the workplace. She lives in the beautiful mountains of British Columbia, and when she's not overdoing life as an Enneagram 8, she enjoys cycling and camping in her VW van. My sister at heart. She's involved in projects that work with genocide widows in Rwanda, teaching them self-defense and grounding techniques to help with trauma recovery. And on top of that, she runs a school in a village in Uganda. Wow, this is a busy woman having an impact in the world. Today, I'm going to ask Stacy to share more, though, about why offering, those seemingly meager things that we take for granted, why that matters in the world, and then how we can move past our own struggles and thoughts of inadequacy and insignificant so that we can offer what we can, and then what happens when we do, and what she did and how she parlayed her 50th birthday into a hugely significant milestone and a life-changing event for herself and for others. So with that, let's welcome our guest, Stacy. Hey, Stacy.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you on the show. I will tell you that when I read that you like camping in your VW van, it brought back memories of me. I actually lived in my van for a short period. You know, when you're like in your late teens and early 20s, and all of a sudden they go, you can't live here anymore. You've got to live somewhere. I'm going, okay, I'll live in my van. That worked for a couple of days until I could find a place to be. But anyway, what year is your van? And did you give your van a name?
Of course I did. So she is a 1990 Vanagon Karat, so a weekender. I did not want to have the cooking facilities inside the van because my husband is 6'5" and that just won't work for him. So we have the queen size bed in the back and a table that lifts up, and we actually bought her on our 30th anniversary, which was around the time I was turning 50 as well. And so I named her Annie for the Anniversary. I know it's like a dad joke.
Oh, I like it.
That's the name.
Well, it's a good way to remember it though, right?
Yeah, it's great. When you talk about, the memories and having to live in your van right now, it's like people want to live in their vans down by the river.
I know.
The
times have changed.
That's right.
Times have changed. I remember I moved out. I think this is when I moved out of my house. So the van, I bought a 66 van used when I moved out of the house at 18, but I bought it when I was 16, right? Those prices, I paid $500 for this van. It was in great shape. Can you imagine that? And I named it Eddie for Eddie Haskell, like on Leave It to Beaver, because this van was perfect until he wasn't.
Right, exactly.
Right. So my boyfriend, we rebuilt the engine so that we could drive across Canada to go to the Montreal game. So that's how long ago that was. And then back through the States. But tons of great memories. And some roadside assistance.
You have to have that. That's part of it. You have to join the club at some point.
You do. And it's not like it wasn't computerized, so it wasn't all that difficult. You just had to put in the grunt and grind and grime. to do it.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
anyway, I envy you having a van, and I may yet get one, but
You should.
well, right now I'm a little spoiled, but that would be super fun.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
let's get on to the podcast. But when I saw that, I thought, oh my God, this is great. And
That's
what a
a big
beautiful
part of my
part of the
life.
country. Yeah.
Yeah.
So start a bit about your background. I know you're a teacher, a principal. How did you come to know and use the Enneagram? What was the intersection of those things?
Yeah, so I grew up in Colorado, and when I turned 18, I moved to Canada. We got married and lived a lot of our lives in Canada. And then we thought it would be nice to go back to Colorado for a little bit and be near my family. And so part of that transition was that my husband and I both worked for a therapeutic boarding school. So at-risk youth would come from all over the country and live on campus. And I was a teacher there, best job ever. And my husband was a therapist. And so part of the therapy was introducing the staff and the kids to the Enneagram. And so I kind of paid attention, and we had a couple of the books on the shelf, and I very quickly recognized myself. It's not hard to recognize yourself when you first start because it's the number that you like the least, probably. Really looking for wisdom in parenting my own kids. But then I kind of put it on the shelf and kind of had it in the back of my mind. I knew that I was an Enneagram 8 without question. But I didn't really start applying the wisdom until about, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago. We did a book study of The Road Back to You by Cron and Stabile at work with our staff. And we each had to take a number and present it and learn about it. And it was so pivotal to my understanding, not only understanding myself deeper, but really seeing my family members and my coworkers. Just really kind of opened my eyes to things that I needed to change, and how, why my husband and I were having the same issues over and over again. And so it was so life-changing for me that I've always been interested in therapy or, counseling and things like that, but I just didn't have the gumption, being a middle-aged woman, to go back to school and get my counseling degree. So my husband suggested, why don't you become an Enneagram coach? Because that's where it all started for you anyways. And I thought, that is brilliant. So that's what I did. I went through the training in typical 8 fashion, in record speed, and started building my business. So now that's kind of a side gig. I'm a little afraid to apply myself too much to it because I know that it can blow up as quickly as I want it to, and I still have to, pay attention to my full-time job. So it's been great though. It's very life-giving, and I eventually want to be doing that all the time for sure.
So you move it from being your side gig to your full gig, but over time.
That's right. And something I can do from my van if need be.
Absolutely. The best part about being location independent, right?
Exactly.
I love it. Let me ask you a question. When you guys presented it at your school, each, on your team numbers, were you presenting your own numbers or just a number, like you got assigned a number?
We got to choose. We were not allowed to present our own numbers. So I presented for number 4 and number 7. And it was really fun because I found some things that were meaningful to those particular numbers and incorporated them into my presentation with, music and art and those kinds of things for the 4. And then for the type 7, we had fake margaritas and salsa and talked about the enthusiasts. So yeah, I can't even remember who presented my number. I'm sure I had a lot of things going on in my mind about what I wanted to say about it, but I probably held my tongue pretty well, I would think.
Well, I really like your approach to doing that because it forces you to learn too, right? You're knowing about yourself, but you're also considering other numbers, which that really is that connection zone when we can understand one another after we know ourselves. So we're not fixing the world.
Right. Yeah.
I do want to ask you a question that I ask all our guests. So I'm going to back you up just a second.
Sure.
Now, given that you're working and doing this, is there something that you do every day that keeps you focused on your own big goals and dreams so that you don't get pulled off of Stacy?
I thought a lot about this question, and I have tried really, really hard to do the things that I know a lot of people do: meditation, journaling, yoga, and I just cannot sit still long enough to do those things. I really give it a good try, but then 5 minutes I'm kind of done. So I need to, because I'm in the gut triad and I live out of my body, I need to be doing physical things. So I get outside and I walk for 5 miles. I, of course, ride my bike, which we'll get into later. My bike is my happy place, and I have a great trail right up by my workplace. So I'll just hop on my bike and go up there. And I just like to let my mind just go wherever it's going to go. I laugh at myself with the things I think about, but that's really what I have to get outside. Even when it's really cold, I just find that is one of the best things for me. And I think the other thing is that my husband also works from home, and I rely on him for just kind of a daily grounding. And when I start to get too worked up about things or have what I know is the wrong perspective of something, but I'm not sure why, he is a great sounding board, very, very wise man. And so I rely on him a lot in our time together too.
Well, I think that's perfect. It's so funny. People often think they have to do the meditation or whatever.
Yeah.
I know for me, well, I've tried, I do that, but I do it sporadically. But I will say, like you, the one thing I do every day is I'm outside.
Yeah.
There are very few days. So when the weather's cold and I've got sideways winds, like really pounding winds, I'll wimp out a little bit because I just that core bone chill, right? Or when when I can't cover my whole face.
Right.
You know what? We might have to do inside things.
Yeah, do something.
But that is so powerful to do that, and it's so connecting.
Oh yeah,
nature and it's so powerful to be outside. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. It's the best. It's the best thing for sure. And plus you can listen to podcasts and be productive and feel like you're learning or something at the same time. So
I usually am listening to a podcast or a book.
Yep.
And talking to my dog at the same time so he doesn't feel ignored.
Yeah.
So I do want to go back to the question that I told folks that I was going to ask you, and that is, what is it about doing those small things, or what you call in your words, the meager things, right? The seemingly meager things. Why do you say that matters?
Well, because that's all we have to offer, really. Most of us can't be great people. We can't offer great things. We're not famous. We don't have a lot of money necessarily, and our bodies might be falling apart, or there's nothing spectacular about most of us. And so all we have to offer, and myself, all I had to offer, or all I have to offer, is the small things. And Mother Teresa, of course, is the one who said we can't do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And so that is where I try to, that's the space in which I live. Yeah.
So when you say small things, so now I'm thinking about the Enneagram, right? And for some of the numbers, small things are still going to be big things for other numbers, right? They're going to go, what? I can't do that. So give me an example of a couple of your ideas of what small things are that you've done that you've seen go, whoa, that made a difference.
That's a great question. And I appreciate what you're saying about the Enneagram, because my small things, an 8's small things are usually things that other numbers see as
they're big.
They're big. And they don't necessarily start that way, but they end up taking on a life of their own, which is what happens in my life. But I would say to not be a big thing, that turns into a big thing like a trip around Uganda, which we'll talk about, but just listening to people and trying to empathize with them. And as a teacher, I've had a lot of opportunity to just listen and empathize and allow space for people to be themselves. And then people will come back to me later and say, you have no idea what this conversation meant to me. I had a girl from a youth group contact me just a couple months ago, and she wasn't even a regular attendee in my group. But she said, I watched how you parented and I watched how you lived your life. And now I foster kids and I'm just trying to be like you. And I couldn't even really remember her last name. And so I think that the things that we have when we just offer ourselves to other people, as a listener, I've seen that that's probably one of the most significant things in my life, is just how that has increased into things and reaches that you have no idea that are happening. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes you may never know. What a great
Exactly.
blessing that she came back and shared that with you.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often, but yeah, that was it. I was astounded. I was just totally blown away.
Well, that's what I think of when you think about like the quote unquote meager things, depending on who you are and your personality, those are usually the things that you take for granted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, well, you can get things done, right? When you say, I'll take on something small, but it becomes this big thing. Well, for other people, like that's just how you operate. You're very fast, your mind works. And other people are going, well, I don't know, but thank goodness she did that, because as a result, X, Y, and Z happened. And you may have, that's just a normal course of the day for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is a part of my number that I really grew into being proud of, and learning, along with all of the garbage that comes with being an 8, because there's garbage with every number. Man, there are some really great things that also come with every type. And 8s, and I'm not saying 8s in particular, but 8s do pretty big things. And that was one thing that I had to grow into being proud of. And kind of the flip side of the coin, right, is the passion and the intensity can harm people, but it can also help people if you're healthy and you start applying it in the right way.
So what do you mean when you say healthy, so that our listeners get a sense of what you're talking about?
Well, when I'm healthy as an 8, I allow other people space in the room. And my husband's going to laugh when he listens to this, because he's like, can I get some more of that? We have this conversation on a regular basis.
Well, he lives with you. He gets to see your blind spots,
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's creating space for people and giving grace to people and allowing them to not be me. Allowing them to not do things the way that I do, or as quickly as I would do them, or think the way that I do. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Well, it makes perfect sense. A couple of my favorite people, and I didn't know their Enneagram types until fairly in recent history, like the last 2 or 3 years, but they are super accomplished women, very caring women. And boy, when they just start and things around them start happening, right? It's like, here we go. And people follow.
Yeah.
But I do know both of them have had pushback there, and they don't come across, I mean, their energy is really great, but I like that energy, right? I'm comfortable with that energy. But I do know for other folks, and I've heard them each described as, they're kind of intense. They're kind of scary, right? But they are the kindest people. And thank goodness they're around, because things have changed because of both of them. 2 different geographic areas. They have changed their communities because of that. And similar to you. So yeah, I love those 8 women.
We do bring that intensity. But yeah, certain numbers definitely are going to be more receptive to that than others.
So Can you share a little bit about maybe how, well, actually, let's go back. I'm sorry, I'm changing my mind. Let's talk about your bike and your 50th birthday, and then I'll pull off of that.
Sure. So I love my bike. Her name is Wednesday. I named her as well. she's a fat bike. So it's the kind of bike that's designed to ride in the winter. And I bought her because I needed to train in the winter. And then we switch out and put smaller tires. So she is one of my favorite possessions because she's just become a friend to me. And part of that growth to become that weird about my bike was all about that trip that we did. And do you want to get into that right now, or?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was turning 50 a few years ago and wanted to do, some people go to Hawaii and they have a big party. And so I wanted to do something significant, but I'm really, really introverted. And so I didn't want it to be a party or something per se. I thought, well, why don't I use this platform to do something for someone else? And because both my husband and I love riding our bikes, he more than me, he's way better than me, but we love our African friends. We've been to Africa a few times and we have ties there. And so we kind of, in my mind, all of a sudden it was like a light bulb moment. It's like, why don't I go for a really long bike ride in Africa and raise money for the African children that can't afford to go to school? And I didn't really realize what I was saying, but I made it. I made it Facebook official by announcing what we were doing, and then there was no stopping. There was no going back, and I'm not gonna say I'm doing it and then not do it. So it just took off from there. So we spent about 2 years training and raising money, and we ended up raising over, I think, $45,000 before we left, and which was more than enough to pay for these 50 children to go to school for the year. And then we loaded up our bikes and all of our gear, and we had a route planned out, and we flew over there and spent 2 months, 50 days riding our bikes around the entire country counterclockwise, and just immersing ourselves in the culture and with the people. And we're both, like I said, we're both extremely introverted. And I would say Uganda is probably the most extroverted country on the planet. And so the biking was actually ended up being the easy part. It was the social aspects of having to wave and say hi to everybody. And you could not stop your bike to rest without a crowd gathering around you and asking questions and wanting to touch your hair. Well, my hair for sure, and the bikes and the gear. And so that part was really draining, but there was just so many interesting things to look at and hear and see and smell that it just made the days go by super fast.
What was your most memorable, do you have a most memorable from that 50 days? I know that's a tough question.
No, for sure. I do. Before we left, there were a lot of people saying, aren't you afraid? Like, you're stupid, or you're crazy, and why are you doing this? And it was just out of not being educated, I think, about what it's like over there. And we kind of knew a little bit about what to expect. And yes, we were going through areas that did have cannibals and, wild animals that are dangerous and things. But my 8-ness just kicked in as far as me living in denial and not being afraid that we just went for it. So there was one moment, though, where probably one of the scariest times on the trip for sure for me. And when I look back at it now, everything would have been fine. But we were coming into a village, and we would usually ride for a couple of hours and then stop for a Coke. You can get Coke or water, whatever, everywhere. And so we stopped for a Coke, and because we were riding our bikes on the opposite side of the road, because they ride opposite of Canada and North America, we crossed the road to turn in. And then when we left, John was still adjusting things on his bike and joking with some kids. And he would always give me a head start because I'm so much slower than him. Why don't you get started and just ride, and I'll catch you? And so when I left the shop, I went the wrong way on the road. and started going back the direction that we had just come from. And because, the dirt is red everywhere and the trees look the same, it did not register to me that I was seeing the same things. And so I got pretty far away and realized he's not coming. I was looking back, and finally I stopped and just was waiting, and he's not coming. I'm thinking maybe he has a flat, or what is going on? And then I just heard this voice say, you need to go back. So I hopped on and I did not want to ride one extra meter of this trip. And so that's why I waited for so long. But I started riding back towards the shop, and I find the shop, and I'm saying, Tall Mzungu, where is he? And they said, well, he went that way, which was the opposite. And then it dawned on me that I had gone the wrong way. So now I have all kinds of energy hopping on my bike and riding like a bat out of hell, trying to find him, knowing that he is riding his bike fast to try and catch me. And so
like an adrenaline rush.
Oh gosh, I was so scared because I didn't have any way to reach him. We only had one phone, and I had it with me. So I start riding my bike, and I just start praying, and I'm looking and scanning, and there's just colors and everything, everywhere. But because he's the only tall white guy in this whole, side of the country at this time, I figured I would be able to see him pretty easily. And I couldn't find him. And finally I got to the intersection where we were going to have to turn. And it was really busy, all kinds of just cows and people and bikes and everything. And then I see him coming back towards me with this look on his face like, I am going to kill you right now. I felt so stupid and so sorry because he had been chasing me down and he's like, wow, she's really kicking ass here. She's going so fast. And then it dawned on him, no, so he started asking people, have you seen, this lady with red hair? And he's trying to motion with his hands, and they're saying, no, haven't seen her. So then he knew I was behind him. And so we ended up meeting right at the intersection where we had to turn, like just in time. If I would have gone past that, then we would have missed each other completely because he would have, gone down that road. So it was a God thing that we met up. And he didn't talk to me for a little while after that.
You were on bikes and he could just dispel his energy riding.
Yeah, that it's good for that. Definitely it's good for that. So that was probably the most memorable, a scary moment that we had, but there were lots of other memories, just learning about their culture and some of the horrific things that have happened in that country with Idi Amin and Cody. And so it was definitely the trip of a lifetime. It's hard to say just one memory besides that one that stands out, because it was all so good and we didn't have any mechanicals and we felt safe. So it was just an amazing, amazing experience. I felt so honored and blessed to be able to do it.
Just think about all the stories the Ugandans had about that crazy tall guy with the woman with the crazy red hair, right?
Oh, yeah.
We were at the store and these two people came.
I know. And this one guy, we were kind of at a station where there was lots of hubbub and people it was always gathering a crowd. It was could get to the point where it was intimidating, and we would just say, okay, let's just get on our bikes and go, even though we're not rested. And there was one point where there was probably around 20, 25 men starting to close in on us and looking at our bikes and trying to look at the different gear. And one man was asking, give me money. And John just said, well, why don't you give me money? Does it look like I have money to give? I have no money. And the man said to him, well, okay, when you come back next year, you find me and give me $10. And John was like, okay, you got yourself a deal. If I ever do this again and find you in this village amongst all these people, I will give you $10. And the man was happy with that.
Fair enough. Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to turn left here. No pun intended. We're at an intersection, but I'm going to turn left and talk about the Enneagram. But I'm going to ask if we can dive into how you use it with your teens, because I know I asked, one of the things I asked pre-interview is like, what are the questions you get asked a lot? And I was amazed by the focus on teens, including what's wrong with my teen, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So how are you helping? Let's start with the parents, first. How do you help them understand their teen through the Enneagram, especially if they're really young and maybe don't even know their numbers all the way?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. So I think it's super valuable, first of all, for the teen to understand their number, because it gives them some language around why they're doing what they're doing, why they're feeling left out or anxious, why they're maybe not getting along with their parents or seeing eye to eye with their siblings. And so I spend a lot of time just helping the teen understand what their number is. And I've seen, depending on what type they are, certain types are so freed by that knowledge, that knowing that there are other people out there like them. And then others have to struggle with the fact that they are that type and they don't want to be that type and they don't like it and they want to be another type. And so really moving deep into what they have to offer uniquely as their type.
So can you share which, you said that some teens have struggle more than others with the type. What types are those typically that you see that like they feel the most invisible until they take and understand who they are more through the Enneagram?
Yeah, in my experience, it's the type 4s, the romantics. And I think a lot of parents might look at their teens going through angsty situations and maybe some rebellion and automatically assume, oh, my kid's a 4, or they're so moody and it's like a roller coaster. But I think when a student is a true 4, because I really do think that 4s are the most misunderstood type on the Enneagram. 4s and 8s, actually, not to throw myself in there, but 4s for sure. And for them to have language around wanting to be seen and why they feel left out and that piece of them that they feel that they're missing, to realize that they're not missing anything is huge, but also that there are some other people who also feel like that they're not alone in feeling like that, has been, I would say, probably the most significant coaching I've done has been with either parents of 4s or type 4 students.
So how do you help them move? I don't want to use the word stuck. That's what comes to mind, but they're not actually stuck. They're developing. Mm-hmm. And so, and honestly, I remember being a teen better than you think I would at this age. It was, well, and and I always crack me up. People said, that's the best time of life. And I'm going, have you like forgotten how tough it is to be a teen?
Oh gosh.
It's tough.
It stunk. I thought looking back, I would have said that I was a 4 as a teen, but now I know I was an unhealthy 8, but looking more like a 5. But yeah, it's tough. There was nothing fun about it for me. So I think that's why I really love working with teens so much, is because I know it can be horrible.
So pretend I'm a 4, and it's new to me. I have no clue what it means to be a 4, but you've helped me understand that's who I am. What special gifts do you tell me that I have, and what direction do you point me so that I can grow into my stronger, more whole self as a 4 and be more self-accepting?
Mm-hmm. The thing that I love about the 4s in my life is that they are the safest place to be sad. They are not trying to talk you out of negative emotions. They're not trying to spiritually bypass what you're feeling. They will sit there with you for as long as you want. And that is a superpower that no other type has, is their willingness to go deep and to be authentic And I feel like today's culture must be really, really difficult for fours because it's all about pushing that stuff away, right? And filling yourself with experiences, or um, putting on this facade that everything's great on Instagram. And these fours are slowly dying watching this world be so inauthentic. And so I think that fours are the most authentic type, and they offer the safest place when people are struggling.
So when you help a four get stronger, talk to the audience a little bit about what direction they go. So we talked about, like when you were saying you go to your low side of 5 when you're not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for a 4, what does that look like? Because I'm imagining there's a young 4 or maybe a parent of a 4 trying to figure it out, you know, but help me understand what, if I were the parent of a 4 and they're struggling, what would I be seeing? And are there ways or words I can use to help them not get out of their feelings, but also not feel so alone? Like where's their strength or their growth path?
Right. I think the biggest thing, if you hear nothing else, audience, for if you're parenting a 4, is to just listen to them first, and give them space to feel their feelings. As an 8, I typically would try to talk my kids out of their feelings a lot because I'm feeling repressed, and I'm a doer, so what are we going to do about this? And your 4s are not looking for you to do anything for them. They really just want you to acknowledge that situations are hard, or that this stinks that I didn't get invited to this party, and not try to fix it. Just allow them space to feel that, because chances are they're going to move out of it more quickly than you will if you pick that up. The direction, so an unhealthy 4 will probably, an extremely unhealthy 4 might be teens that struggle with self-harm, or just totally secluding themselves, becoming a martyr, those kinds of feelings, and talk about martyrdom and nobody loves me and I'm so different. And they're very, very complicated types. They've got a push-pull thing happening where they really want to be a part of something and at the same time want to be unique and not like the group. And so it's just as confusing for them as it is for the parents, for sure. I'm not sure if that answered all of the parts of your question there.
Well, it was a compound question, not very fair to ask, but you did answer them. Could we talk about a couple other numbers that you frequently work with or see teens, I think teens like who are questioning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Going back to, I remembered one other thing I wanted to say, and this can apply to all of the teens, is the whole practice of the cognitive behavioral therapy. And I'm not a therapist, I don't pretend to be, but I have found that looking at thought distortions with teens, it has been pivotal in helping them understand when they are catastrophizing or when they have all or nothing thinking. And I find that the 4s that I have coached struggle with those lies more than other types, somewhat more than other types. I think we all could read through the cognitive distortions and recognize ourselves in many of them. But work around the cognitive behavioral therapy would be a really strong suggestion if you're parenting a 4 who's struggling. Other things that I've seen would be around, sorry, you're going to have to maybe cut this part out. You're going to have to repeat your question again for me.
So pick a different number.
Yeah.
Pick a different number of teen, and then share with us some of the things we might see them trying to figure out or understand more about themselves. It might look like they're struggling, but it's going to look very different than a 4, right?
Right.
So what might that look like? What number is it? Okay. And then if I'm a parent, what's one thing, not everything, but one thing I can do to help my teen feel, recognize them, whatever, so that they're more confident and feel less inadequate?
Yeah, sure. So I've coached a lot of type 9s, and those are the peacemakers. And I think as a teen, what that looks like in an unhealthy place is numbing themselves. And so that could be video gaming, it could be sleeping, it could be It could be actually anything. It could be reading a book. It could be practices that from the outside don't seem so harmful, and probably practices that a lot of us should be doing on a regular basis. But for a 9 who's kind of falling asleep to themselves, and by that I mean they are either merging with their friends and losing their own identity in the process, or they are just done with change and they don't want any kind of conflict in their family or with their friends. And so they just kind of fall asleep to what they actually want in their lives. And so for parents, I would say one thing that you can do if your 9 is struggling is to encourage them to get 1 or 2 things done that day that's on their list. It could be something as small as making their bed in the morning. It could be as big as finishing that project that, you know, they've been procrastinating about for a couple of weeks and it's due tomorrow and it's midnight. So just kind of having your finger on the pulse if you're seeing your teen withdraw in a way that's new. And they actually have many other things that they should be doing just as part of their daily lives, to just pay attention and help them set some small goals for themselves of just getting one thing done at a time.
Will a 9 teen be receptive to that, or will they feel that you are intruding?
Well, in my experience, the 9s have been really receptive to that, but there are the 9s who will say, yeah, sure, I'll do that. But then they have no intention of doing that whatsoever. It's their little way of getting out their anger and being passive aggressive. So I would make sure that you have a plan with some accountability with your 9, so that they can't just basically lie to your face that they're going to do it, fully knowing that they're not going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's tough. Sometimes we have patterns, ingrained patterns or repeating patterns in a family. And so they're going, yeah, you've always told me that. I haven't had to do it. So it may take more than one attempt.
Oh, for sure. It's a process, I think. Over and over again with everything you're doing with your teen is a process. None of this is going to happen overnight. And I mean, when we worked at the boarding school, a lot of parents would be dropping their kids off and saying, I want you to fix them. And it really is a mindset of realizing that these kids aren't broken. They don't need to be fixed. They need to be understood and then developed into their healthiest version. But there's nothing broken about, there's nothing broken. We're just doing the best we can with the traumas that they've experienced and moving. That's why the Enneagram is so great, because it's like this compass that just points to where you're at and where you're moving and where you could potentially go. If you do some work on yourself. And that's why I just find it such an invaluable tool for insight into teens, especially.
Well, and as you said, it's like you work on yourself. So fixing my kid is not on that list.
No, and you don't want to say to the parent, well, what did you do to them? You know, what did you do to them in the first place?
That doesn't really build relationship.
No, that's something an 8 would blurt out, right? And then regret it later. But
and then go, I hope that wasn't out loud.
Yeah, exactly. Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, but not again. Well, but it's, and we can joke about that, but there are, and I've shared this before on the podcast, that there are organizations I work with that want their personnel issues, quote unquote, fixed, and they're people, right? So it's not a quick fix, and there's often many contributing factors. And some things need a therapist, right? Absolutely. In conjunction with the great work of self-awareness and reflection that the Enneagram can provide.
Mm-hmm. A lot of my clients are actually going to therapy as well. But whereas therapy kind of looks at the past and maybe things that have happened to them, the Enneagram is all about who you are and who you could become. Yep. And so it's much, it's more light, you know, it's kind of like a friend that's coming along and saying, hey, I know that this is kind of who you are, but this is who you could be. How can I help you get there?
Yep. And that's such a great orientation, right? What's possible? I love that question. Yeah. What would be possible?
Yes.
What would be
Absolutely.
possible if I were not believing these limiting thoughts, or if I was doing those meager acts? Right? And I think about when you said that, like they may seem small to make your bed, but it sets your frame. It sets the day, right? I've accomplished this. And boy, when I look back and it's made well, I feel good. And I know like there are days you're in a rush and you go, and I've walked away thinking that's good enough. And then I look back and I'm going, not good enough, because I'm not going to appreciate it when I try to get into it tonight.
Exactly, right? When you come back to it, you're like, oh, why didn't I make it? I kind of like getting into my bed when it's made.
I love it being made. And most often, my husband makes it, and I'm not going to make my bed worse than he makes it. So a little competition there. But
Yeah.
but I'm not, all joking aside, that does set the frame for the day, right? When you do those tiny little things, or you listen to a friend, or you try to understand your teen more. And do you find that has changed how you teach in school as well?
Yeah, I find that I teach English and phys ed, so there's completely different agendas in both. But I find that really good advice for my students around that piece of offering what's meager or starting small is just get this piece done, and then it builds, and then their confidence builds over time until all of a sudden the essay is done and the project is done. And then always taking that time too to go back and reflect, what are you most proud of from this year? And it inevitably every single time is they pick the one that was the hardest for them to do. It was the Shakespeare unit, or it was the poetry book I had to write. It's always the hard things that when you start small and you persevere and you dig into all that grit you can muster and get it done, those are always the things that you're the most proud of. And it's the same with our bike trip, right? It started small. I can ride a bike. I can tell people and probably raise some money, and then it turns into something huge, not because of anything I've done, but because of what other people are willing to give and add to it, and because God completely had his hand in this trip from the beginning, for sure.
So that leads me to my second to last question. You said, this is a quote from what you shared with me, which is, it's all about the loaves and fish offering. So how does that play out in your daily life?
Oh, every day. Like I said before, that's all I have to offer is this really meager sack lunch. And I find that if I bring that sack lunch with me wherever I go, and I look for opportunities of who needs for me to share it with, then it can just be little things. It can be helping someone at the grocery store, or encouraging someone at work who I know is having a hard time, or writing someone a card or sending a text. And so I just try to keep in mind that when I say yes to things, even though they feel like they could, blow out of proportion and be hard, saying yes to the little things up front opens that door at least. And then God can do what he wants to with my loaves and fish. If he doesn't want to grow them, that's fine. There's only a few people eating. But if he wants to feed, 10,000, then he can do that too.
All right. So my last question for you is, what is the best way for folks to get a hold of you? I know that you're doing this as your side job right now, but my bet would be there's people going to say, I need to talk to Stacy about my teen, about my teaching, about homeschooling. So what's the best way for folks to connect with you?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. So I am trying to put a lot of good content on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is @FreshTracksEnneagram. I like the idea of the fresh tracks kind of, going into uncharted territory. And then my website is freshtracksenneagram.com. And those would be the two. There's a contact link there, and you can read more about the Enneagram and more about me on my website. But Instagram is also good to just start a conversation.
And what if folks want to help you out with your school in Uganda?
Oh gosh, so I have a website for that too, actually. If they want to help with that, rather than overwhelm everybody with web addresses, they can reach out to me through those handles I just gave you, and I can steer them in the right direction. We are always looking for more support there because the needs are endless.
Well, and congratulations on educating all those kids for a year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's grown into, we've kept up with 12 of those original 50. And then we wanted to have something that was a little more sustainable and all in one place, because those 50 kids were kind of spread out all over the place. So we bought some land there of a school that was dilapidated. The kids were actually sitting in the trees when they were trying to do their lessons. And we're just concentrating all of our efforts on getting this school up to code. And we just passed our inspection with the Minister of Education. And people are now starting to pay attention and coming from all over wanting their kids to go to this school. So there's about 200 students, I think, and 10 staff right now. So it's growing.
So do you need financial support for that?
Oh yeah, we have sponsorships for students. We have sponsorships for teachers. We're trying to raise money right now for them to have school uniforms because that's such a huge status symbol and actually keeps the children safer as they're walking to and from school if they're wearing a school uniform. And, books and tables that they break and playground equipment, there's food. We feed them lunch every day. So yes, if they wanted to financially help, that project is called Get Schooled. And they can reach out to me if they're interested in hearing more about that. Even if they want to chat or talk about Africa, I'd love to have those conversations.
I would encourage folks to do that. And I'm a big proponent of nonprofits doing good work locally in the States, in Canada, around the world. So folks, honestly, when I listened that their $45,000 educated those children for a year, that is not a lot of money when we all chip in a little. So reach out to Stacy on her pages, on her handles, and give a little, because wouldn't that be cool to know that you help those kids go to school?
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
All right, Miss Stacy, I want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast. I've enjoyed our time together. I love your story, and I will visualize you camping in your van.
With my bike on the back. That's
great. Of course. All the good stuff's got to go with.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Really enjoyed our conversations today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.